The rain hammered against the windows of the Lee Corporation headquarters in Seoul's Gangnam district as Park Minji stood before the marriage certificate, her hands trembling. 24 hours ago, she had been the cherished daughter of the Park family's textile empire. Now she was signing away her freedom to save her father's company from bankruptcy. "You understand the terms," said the lawyer, adjusting his glasses with manicured fingers. His office smelled of leather and expensive cologne, a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed Minji's life in recent weeks. "The marriage to Lee Joonwoo will last 1 year minimum. During this time, you will live in the Lee family compound in Pyeongchang-dong. You will attend public functions as required and present the image of a united couple. After 12 months, if both parties agree, the union can be dissolved quietly or made permanent. The Lee Corporation will absorb Park Textile's debt and restructure the company. Your father will retain a consulting position." Minji's father sat beside her. His face aged 10 years in the past month. Park Dae-hoon had built his textile business from nothing, working 16-hour days to give his daughter every advantage. Now that empire was crumbling under the weight of bad investments and a market shift he hadn't anticipated. The shame in his eyes was almost unbearable. "Minji, you don't have to do this," he said for the 100th time, his voice breaking. "I can find another way. I can sell the house, liquidate everything." "And then what, Appa?" Minji asked softly. "You've already mortgaged everything. This is the only solution that keeps the workers employed and gives you a chance to rebuild." She signed with steady determination despite her shaking hands. She had never met Lee Joonwoo, the elusive CEO of Lee Corporation who had built a technology empire before turning 30. All she knew were rumors of his cold demeanor, his ruthless business tactics, and the mysterious scar that ran along his left jaw, supposedly from a car accident that had also claimed his parents' lives 5 years ago. Some said the accident had changed him from a warm, promising young man into someone calculating and distant. Others claimed he had always been that way, and the tragedy simply gave him an excuse to stop pretending otherwise. "He's not a bad man," the lawyer said, perhaps sensing Minji's distress. "He's just focused, driven. The company is his life. That's supposed to be comforting," Minji muttered. The civil ceremony took place the next day in a sterile government office with only the necessary witnesses present. No flowers, no music, no celebration. Just signatures and stamps and the weight of obligation settling over Minji's shoulders like a heavy coat. Lee Joonwoo didn't attend, sending his lawyer as proxy with a brief note of apology about urgent business in Shanghai. Minji tried not to see it as an omen. 3 days later, Minji arrived at the Lee family compound in Pyeongchang-dong with 2 suitcases containing her entire life. The sprawling traditional hanok had been modernized while preserving its historical charm, with heated floors, smart home technology, and walls that could slide open to reveal stunning views of the surrounding mountains. It was beautiful and cold and utterly intimidating. An elderly housekeeper named Mrs. Kang greeted her at the entrance. The woman was perhaps 60, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She bowed respectfully. "Welcome, Mrs. Lee. I've been with this family for 30 years. I practically raised the young master after his parents passed. If you need anything at all, please let me know." "Thank you, Mrs. Kang. And please call me Minji when we're alone. This whole Mrs. Lee thing feels strange." Mrs. Kang smiled. "As you wish. Come, let me show you to your quarters. The master is away on business in Shanghai. He left instructions that you should settle in comfortably. Your quarters are in the East Wing." As they walked through corridors adorned with contemporary art and antique pottery, Mrs. Kang provided a running commentary on the house's history. The original structure dates back 200 years. The young master's great-great-grandfather was a scholar and poet. After the Lee family made their fortune in shipping, they modernized the compound but kept the traditional layout. The master's parents were very proud of that heritage. Minji's room was spacious and elegantly appointed with a mixture of traditional Korean furniture and modern amenities. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden where cherry trees stood bare in the late autumn chill. A large photograph on the dresser caught her attention. A younger Joonwoo with an older couple, all three smiling at some family gathering. He looked different in the photo, lighter somehow before the scar and the tragedy. "That was taken 6 months before the accident," Mrs. Kang said softly, noticing Minji's gaze. "He was different then. Happier." As they walked through corridors adorned with contemporary art and antique pottery, Mrs. Kang provided a running commentary on the house's history. The original structure dates back 200 years. The young master's great-great-grandfather was a scholar and poet. After the Lee family made their fortune in shipping, they modernized the compound but kept the traditional layout. The master's parents were very proud of that heritage. Minji's room was spacious and elegantly appointed with a mixture of traditional Korean furniture and modern amenities. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden where cherry trees stood bare in the late autumn chill. A large photograph on the dresser caught her attention. A younger Joonwoo with an older couple, all three smiling at some family gathering. He looked different in the photo, lighter somehow before the scar and the tragedy. "That was taken 6 months before the accident," Mrs. Kang said softly, noticing Minji's gaze. "He was different then. Happier." That first night Minji barely slept. The room was too quiet, too unfamiliar. She kept thinking about her father, alone in their much smaller apartment now, probably not sleeping either. She thought about Joonwoo, this stranger she had married, and wondered what kind of man would agree to such an arrangement. The business world could be ruthless, but this felt particularly calculated. Was he truly saving her father's company out of opportunity, or was there something else at play? The next morning, Minji decided to explore the grounds rather than hide in her room feeling sorry for herself. The compound was larger than she had realized, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. There was a main residence, a guest house, staff quarters, and various outbuildings. The landscaping was immaculate even in late autumn, with carefully pruned trees and stone pathways winding through small gardens. As she walked past the security office near the main gate, she noticed a man in a guard's uniform struggling to fix a broken lock on a storage shed. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell slightly over his eyes and a scar along his left jaw that made him look both dangerous and intriguing. He wore the standard security uniform but somehow made it look almost elegant. "Need help?" Minji asked in Korean, approaching cautiously. The man looked up, surprise flickering across his face. His eyes were dark and intelligent, assessing her quickly. "I can manage, thank you. That lock is probably 50 years old. My grandfather had similar ones at our estate before we had to sell it. You need to lift it slightly while turning the key, otherwise the mechanism jams." The guard studied her for a moment, and Minji had the strangest sensation that he was seeing far more than she was showing. Then he handed her the key. "By all means, demonstrate." Minji took the key and applied the technique she had learned as a child, lifting and turning simultaneously. The lock clicked open smoothly. "Thank you," he said. His voice deep and measured with an educated accent that seemed at odds with his position. "You must be the new Mrs. Lee." "Minji is fine. And you are?" "Kang Woo. I work security here." "Nice to meet you, Kang Woo. I have a feeling I'll be seeing you around, since you seem to be the only other person under 60 on this entire compound." A hint of amusement touched his eyes. "Mrs. Kang has a nephew who does landscaping. He's 25. Well then, you're the only interesting person under 60 on this compound. You've determined I'm interesting after a 2-minute conversation about locks? You're reading Nietzsche during your shift," Minji said, gesturing to the book visible through the security office window. That's either interesting or pretentious, and I'm choosing to believe it's the former. This time he actually smiled, transforming his serious face into something almost boyish. It could be both. I suppose it could. What do you think of Beyond Good and Evil so far? I think Nietzsche asks important questions but sometimes mistakes complexity for profundity. What about you? Have you read it? In university, my professor called it essential. I called it exhausting. They talked for another 10 minutes about philosophy, books, and the strange isolation of living in such a large compound. When Minji finally excused herself to continue exploring, she felt lighter than she had in days. At least there was one person here she could have a real conversation with. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Minji would wake early, have breakfast alone in the formal dining room while Mrs. Kang fussed over her, then spend her mornings reading or sketching in the tea house at the edge of the property. The tea house was her favorite discovery. A small traditional structure with paper screen walls and a view of the koi pond. In the afternoons, she would often encounter Kang Woo during his rounds, and they would end up talking. She learned that he had studied literature and philosophy at Yonsei University before circumstances forced him to leave school and find work. He never explained what those circumstances were, and Minji didn't pry. He was well-read, thoughtful, and had opinions about everything from urban development to the preservation of traditional Korean architecture. Their conversations ranged from light-hearted debates about the best Korean films to deeper discussions about purpose and meaning in modern life. "Don't you find this job boring?" Minji asked one afternoon as they sat in the tea house. It had become their informal meeting place. She had started bringing him lunch from the kitchen, claiming the staff prepared too much food and it would only go to waste. "Security allows me time to think," Kang Woo replied, accepting the container of bibimbap she offered. "Besides, every job has dignity if you perform it well. There's something honest about physical work, about walking the grounds and ensuring everything is safe and secure. You sound like you've worked many different jobs." Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of memory or perhaps regret. "I've tried a few things. Nothing quite worked out the way I planned. What about you? What did you do before becoming Mrs. Lee?" Minji hesitated. She hadn't told him the real circumstances of her marriage, and she found she didn't want to. Here in the tea house with Kang Woo, she could pretend to be someone normal having a normal conversation. "I studied art history at Seoul National University and worked at my father's company for a while. Marketing and design mostly. Not particularly exciting. Art history is never boring. What period interests you most?" "Contemporary Korean art, actually. I wrote my thesis on the intersection of traditional techniques and modern themes in post-war Korean painting. There's something powerful about artists who can honor the past while commenting on the present." Kang Woo's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Like Lee Yufan. His minimalist work always struck me as deeply rooted in Korean aesthetics despite his international success." They talked for 2 hours about art, philosophy, and the challenge of maintaining cultural identity in an increasingly globalized world. Minji realized she had laughed more in that conversation than in the entire previous month. When she returned to her quarters that evening, she found a note slipped under her door on expensive stationery with the Lee Corporation letterhead. "Wife, I apologize for my continued absence. Business requires my attention in Hong Kong for another 3 weeks. I hope you are comfortable in the compound. The household accounts are at your disposal. Spend as you wish on anything you need. Mrs. Kang has been instructed to accommodate your requests. I look forward to meeting you upon my return. Lee Joonwoo." The note felt cold and impersonal, like a memo from a distant executive to a minor employee. Minji crumpled it and threw it in the trash, then immediately felt childish and fished it back out. This was her reality. She had married a man who couldn't even be bothered to call her, who communicated through formal notes and lawyers. She had no right to expect warmth or affection. This was a business arrangement, and she needed to remember that. But it still hurt. The weeks passed slowly. November turned to December, and the compound transformed under a light snow. Minji established routines to give structure to her days. She began volunteering at a local community center that taught art classes to children, something Mrs. Kang helped arrange. She explored Seoul's art galleries and museums, often going alone but sometimes imagining what Kang Woo might say about the exhibitions. And she continued to meet him for lunch in the tea house, weather permitting. "Your husband is still away?" Kang Woo asked one particularly cold afternoon. They had moved inside the tea house, and Mrs. Kang had provided a portable heater. "Shanghai, then Hong Kong, now apparently Singapore," Minji said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "I'm beginning to think he's avoiding me. We've been married almost 2 months and haven't even met. Perhaps he's just busy. Running a major corporation requires extensive travel. Perhaps. Or perhaps he realizes this marriage was a mistake and can't face telling me." Kang Woo was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Would that bother you? If he wanted to end it?" "I don't know. Part of me would be relieved. This whole situation is strange and uncomfortable. But another part thinks I should at least meet the man I married before we discuss divorce." Minji laughed without humor. "My life has become very absurd." "Not absurd. Just complicated. There's a difference. What would you do if you were in my situation?" "That's an impossible question. I can't imagine being in your situation." "Try. Imagine you've been forced into marriage with someone you've never met to save your family. What would you do?" Kang Woo considered this seriously, as he did most of her questions. "I think I would try to find meaning in other aspects of life while accepting that some things are outside my control. I would focus on what I could influence, what brought me joy or purpose, and let the rest unfold as it would. Fighting against circumstances we can't change only makes us miserable." "That's very philosophical." "You did ask." "I did. And it's good advice, actually. I've been so focused on what I've lost and what this marriage represents that I haven't thought about what I could gain. Not from the marriage necessarily, but from this time, this place, these experiences." "Exactly. You're living in a beautiful compound with access to resources most people never have. You have time to pursue your interests, to volunteer, to think about what you really want from life. That's not nothing. When did you become so wise?" security guard Kang Woo. "I've had a lot of time to think during night shifts." They smiled at each other, and Minji felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the portable heater. She was becoming attached to these conversations, to this person who seemed to understand her better than people she'd known for years. It was dangerous, she knew. He was an employee on her husband's estate, and she was a married woman, even if that marriage existed only on paper. But she couldn't seem to help herself. As December progressed, the relationship deepened in small but significant ways. Kang Woo started recommending books, leaving them in the tea house for Minji to discover. She began bringing him increasingly elaborate lunches, enjoying the excuse to spend time in the kitchen with Mrs. Kang learning to cook traditional dishes. They developed inside jokes and a comfortable shorthand that comes from spending time together. One particularly memorable afternoon, they walked the compound's perimeter together while Kang Woo did his rounds. Snow had fallen the night before, transforming everything into a winter wonderland. "Did you always want to work in security?" Minji asked, watching her breath form clouds in the cold air. "No. When I was young I wanted to be a professor. Philosophy or literature. I imagined spending my life in university libraries, teaching students to think critically, publishing papers that 12 people would read." He smiled at the memory. "Very impractical dreams. What happened?" "Life. Responsibilities. My father died when I was 22, and suddenly I needed to support my family rather than pursue advanced degrees. My mother had medical issues that required expensive treatment, so I left school and found work. I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. It was what it was. I don't regret taking care of my mother. I just sometimes wonder about the other path, the life I might have lived. It's not too late. You could go back to school eventually. Maybe. For now, this job gives me what I need. Stability, time to read, and apparently the occasional conversation with an art historian who has strong opinions about Korean cinema. Minji laughed. My opinions about Parasite were completely reasonable. You called it overrated. Because everyone acts like it invented class commentary in film when Korean cinema has been exploring those themes for decades. See. Strong opinions. They continued their playful argument as they walked, and Minji realized she was happier than she'd been in months. The marriage that had seemed like a prison was becoming bearable because of these stolen moments with someone who saw her as simply Minji, not as a business transaction or a disappointment to her family. Then one morning everything changed. Mrs. Kang came to Minji's room earlier than usual. Her face flushed with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Mrs. Lee, I need to tell you something about Kang Woo. Minji's heart sank. Had someone noticed how much time they spent together? Was he being fired? His mother took a turn for the worse last night. She's in the hospital in Busan, and the doctors say she needs a specialized cardiac procedure. It's very expensive, more than 100 million won, and his insurance won't cover most of it. He's been working double shifts for months trying to save money, but it's not enough. How much has he saved? I don't know exactly, but I heard him on the phone with the hospital. He sounded devastated. His mother raised him alone after his father died. She sacrificed everything to put him through university. Now he can't save her. Minji felt something crack open in her chest. She thought about Kang Woo's kindness, his intelligence, the way he had made her laugh when she thought she might never laugh again. She thought about his mother, a woman she'd never met but who had raised such a remarkable son. How soon does she need the procedure? Within the week. But Mrs. Lee, I shouldn't have told you all this. It's not your concern. I just thought you might know of resources, perhaps medical charities that could help. Let me think about it. After Mrs. Kang left, Minji sat in her room for a long time. She had maintained a separate bank account from her family's business, money she had earned from small design consulting projects and saved over the years. It amounted to exactly 15 million won, nowhere near enough for the full procedure but perhaps enough to make a difference. And she had access to the household accounts Lee Joonwoo had mentioned in his note, though using her absent husband's money felt wrong. No, this had to come from her. Whatever she gave had to be genuine, not borrowed from the man who owned everything around her. She made her decision quickly, before she could talk herself out of it. She went to the bank and withdrew her entire savings, then had it converted to a cashier's check. That evening, she found Kang Woo at the security office, reviewing camera feeds. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed with worry. I heard about your mother, Minji said without preamble, placing the envelope on his desk. Kang Woo opened it slowly. When he saw the check, his expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked almost like pain. What is this? Enough to help with the medical bills. I know it's not the full amount, but combined with what you've saved, maybe it's enough to start. I can't accept this. He tried to hand it back, his hand shaking slightly. Why not? I want to help. Because you don't even know me. Because you're married to my employer. Because this is more money than I make in half a year. His voice was strained, raw with emotion. Why would you do this? Minji chose her words carefully. Because you're my friend. Because your mother shouldn't suffer when I have the means to help. Because in the last 2 months, You've shown me more kindness and genuine human connection than anyone else in my life. Because you talk to me about philosophy and art and make me remember that there are still good things in the world. Because you matter to me. What about your husband? Does he know you're giving away this much money? He's not really my husband, Minji said quietly. This marriage is a business arrangement. He's never even met me. And this isn't his money. It's mine, earned and saved separately. This is my choice. Kang Woo stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders tense. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. If I accept this, I owe you a debt I may never be able to repay. I don't want repayment. I want your mother to get well. I want you to not carry this burden alone. He studied her face as if memorizing it, and Minji felt something profound shift between them. This was more than friendship, more than kindness. This was the moment when everything changed, though she couldn't have articulated exactly how. Thank you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I will never forget this. Never. Just promise me you'll let me know how she's doing. I promise. The next 2 weeks were tense with waiting. Kang Woo took emergency leave to be with his mother in Busan during the procedure. Minji found the compound unbearably lonely without their afternoon conversations. She threw herself into her volunteer work and spent hours in the tea house trying to sketch but unable to concentrate. Mrs. Kang provided updates. The procedure had gone well. Kang Woo's mother was recovering. He would return to work after Christmas. Then, on a cold morning 3 days before Christmas, Minji received a call from an unknown number. This is Kang Woo. My mother wants to meet you. She's insisting, actually. She says she won't rest until she can thank you properly. Would you be willing to come to Busan? Minji didn't hesitate. Of course. When? Are you free tomorrow? They took the KTX train to Busan together the next morning, sitting side by side as the winter landscape blurred past the windows. Kang Woo seemed different, more subdued but also more present, as if the near loss of his mother had stripped away some protective layer. I've been thinking about what you said, he told her as they traveled. About why you gave me the money. You called me your friend. You are my friend. But I don't think you understand what that means to me. I've been isolated for so long, focused only on survival and responsibility. I forgot what it was like to simply connect with another person without agenda or calculation. You gave me that. Before you gave me the money, you gave me that. You gave me the same thing. Did I? You're trapped in a marriage to a man who ignores you, stuck in a compound that must feel like a very beautiful cage. What did I give you except philosophy discussions? You gave me yourself. Your thoughts, your time, your attention. You made me feel seen as a person, not as a transaction or a disappointment. That matters more than you know. They rode in comfortable silence for a while before Kang Woo spoke again. Can I tell you something I probably shouldn't? Always. When I first saw you struggling with that lock, I thought you were beautiful but probably superficial. Another rich person slumming in their spouse's household. But then you started talking about your grandfather's locks and you had this practical knowledge mixed with genuine curiosity. And then you kept showing up in the tea house with lunch and questions and this relentless interest in everything. You completely surprised me. Good. I like being surprising. His mother's hospital room was in a modern facility overlooking Busan's harbor. Kim Youngmi was perhaps 60, with Kang Woo's same intelligent eyes and a smile that transformed her wan face. She struggled to sit up when they entered, and Kang Woo rushed to help her. Iyama, don't strain yourself. I'm fine. Let me look at her. Kim Youngmi studied Minji with obvious curiosity and then smiled. You're even prettier than my son described. And so young. Come, sit beside me. Minji sat in the chair next to the bed, suddenly nervous. I'm glad you're recovering well, Mrs. Kim. Because of you. Because you saw my son as worthy of kindness. Do you know what he told me? That you gave him your last savings to help a man you thought was just a security guard. Not knowing anything about his family or circumstances beyond what Mrs. Kang mentioned. That's extraordinary. It's really not. Anyone would have done the same. No, child. Most people wouldn't. Most people don't see past their own concerns. But you did. Kim Youngmi took Minji's hand. I raised my son to recognize goodness when he sees it. To value character over everything else. I see that same recognition in his eyes when he looks at you. So I want to ask you something difficult. What are you going to do about your marriage? The question startled Minji. I'm sorry. My son told me about your situation. The arranged marriage, the absent husband, the business transaction. But he also told me that you're developing feelings beyond friendship. I can see it in both of you. So what happens when your husband finally returns? Minji glanced at Kang Woo, who looked uncomfortable but didn't deny his mother's observation. I don't know, she admitted. The marriage has a 1-year term. After that we can dissolve it if we choose. I suppose I'll wait and see what Lee Joonwoo wants. And what do you want? I want. Minji paused, trying to articulate feelings she barely understood herself. I want to feel like I did something with my life beyond saving my father's business. I want connections that matter. I want to stop feeling like I'm trapped in someone else's story. Kim Youngmi nodded slowly. Then make your own story. Don't wait for permission or perfect circumstances. Life is too short and too precious. They visited for another hour, and then Kang Woo walked Minji around Busan's Gamcheon Culture Village, a hillside community of colorful houses and art installations. The winter sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. Your mother is remarkable, Minji said. She's always been like that. Direct, perceptive, unwilling to pretend. The accident that killed my father almost broke her, but she rebuilt herself for my sake. That's why this procedure was so crucial. I couldn't lose her too. You won't. She's strong. They stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the ocean, watching fishing boats return to harbor. Kang Woo turned to Minji with unusual seriousness. My mother was right about one thing. I have developed feelings for you. Feelings that aren't appropriate given our situations. I know you're married and I'm just an employee. But I needed you to know, especially after what you did. You deserve honesty. Minji's heart raced. Kang Woo. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that these months have meant more to me than I can express. Whatever happens, I'll treasure them. They stood in the fading light, the moments stretching between them heavy with possibility and restraint. Then Minji made a choice. She took his hand, interlacing their fingers. I have feelings for you too. I don't know what to do about them, but they're real. They held hands as they walked back to the train station, neither speaking, both understanding that they had crossed some invisible line. The journey back to Seoul felt shorter, the silence between them comfortable and charged at once. When they arrived back at the compound late that night, Mrs. Kang was waiting at the entrance with an expression Minji couldn't read. Mrs. Lee, the master has returned early from Singapore. He's waiting for you in the main hall. Minji's stomach dropped. After nearly 3 months, she was finally going to meet her husband. She looked at Kang Woo, whose expression had shuttered into professional neutrality. I should change first, Minji said. He asked to see you immediately. Minji walked through the compound with Mrs. Kang, her mind racing. What would she say to this man she had married but never met? How would she explain the person she had become in his absence? And what about her feelings for Kang Woo? The main hall was lit with soft lamps, making the traditional architecture glow warmly. A figure stood at the far end with his back to her, looking out at the garden through the open paper screens. He was tall, well-built, dressed in expensive casual clothes. "Hello, wife," he said without turning. "I'm Joonwoo." Then he turned around, and Minji's world tilted on its axis. It was Kang Woo. No, it wasn't Kang Woo. It was someone who looked exactly like him, dressed in expensive clothes, his hair styled differently, but with the same scar along his jaw, the same dark eyes that had watched her over shared lunches in the tea house. "You." Minji couldn't form words. Her legs felt weak. "I apologize for the deception." He walked closer, and she saw the uncertainty in his expression, so different from the CEO she had imagined. "When I returned early from Shanghai to check on some property issues, I found you trying to help with the lock. You didn't know who I was, and I was curious about the woman my board of directors had pressured me into marrying. So I decided to observe you for a few days." "A few days?" Minji's voice rose. "It's been 3 months. You've been pretending to be a security guard for 3 months. I know how it sounds. You know nothing." Tears of fury and humiliation burned her eyes. "I told you things. I shared my thoughts with you. I gave you my money thinking you needed it. I held your hand in Busan. I told you I had feelings for you." "My mother does need that money," Joonwoo said quietly. "That part was true. I do send her money for treatment, though I could obviously afford more. Everything else I told you was true. I read philosophy. I have those opinions. I want to be a professor someday. The only lie was my name and position. That's not a small lie. That's everything." Minji turned away, trying to control the storm of emotions. She felt betrayed, manipulated, and worst of all, foolish. "Why did you keep up the act for so long?" "Because for the first time in 5 years, someone saw me as just a person." His voice softened. "After my parents died and I took over the company at 25, everyone wanted something from me. Every conversation had an agenda. Every smile had a calculation behind it. Business partners wanting deals, potential partners wanting money, employees wanting promotions, board members wanting control. Even my friends from before changed, treating me differently because I was now Joonwoo CEO instead of just Joonwoo. That's a convenient excuse for lying." "You're right. It is an excuse. But it's also true. When you brought me lunch that first time, you did it because you wanted company, not because you were networking. When you argued with me about films and philosophy, you were genuine. You weren't performing or strategizing. You were just being yourself, and that allowed me to be myself too." Minji turned to face him. "You let me complain about you. About my absent husband who couldn't even be bothered to meet me. About this arranged marriage that I hated." "I did. And you were right about everything you said. This marriage was cold and calculated. I agreed to it because the board said it would stabilize the company during a difficult merger, create good publicity, and possibly open doors to your father's business connections. I never thought about you as a real person with real feelings. That was my mistake and my shame. Don't try to make this about noble self-discovery. You lied to me for 3 months." "I did. But that lie also revealed truth. Showed me who you really are. Someone kind enough to give away her last savings to help someone she thought was struggling. Someone intelligent enough to discuss art and philosophy with depth and nuance. Someone lonely enough to seek connection with a security guard because the life she'd been forced into felt empty. Stop analyzing me." "I'm not analyzing. I'm telling you what I discovered. And then you gave me that money." He stepped closer. "When you handed me that envelope, I had 2 accountants on call ready to transfer 100 million won from my mother's procedure. But you gave me 15 million won, everything you had, without hesitation. You gave me everything. So you could have refused it. You could have told me the truth then." "I should have. But I accepted it because I needed to understand why. Why would someone in a loveless arranged marriage, someone who had every reason to be bitter and selfish, give everything to help a stranger? And I realized you weren't bitter. You weren't hardened by circumstances. You were still capable of genuine compassion and connection. That's when I knew I had to tell you the truth, but I was terrified of losing what we had built. Minji shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't process this. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Really here this time, not hiding behind a false identity. He paused. But I want you to know that every conversation we had was real. Every opinion I shared, every laugh, every moment in that tea house, that was the real me. More real than I've been with anyone since my parents died. The real you who lies by omission. Yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation. I made a terrible choice and compounded it every day. I convinced myself I was protecting something precious, but really I was just being a coward. I'm sorry, Minji. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry. Minji looked at him for a long moment, this man who was both familiar and a complete stranger. I can't talk to you right now. I need space. I understand. She left him standing in the main hall and retreated to her quarters, where she finally allowed herself to break down. She cried from anger, from betrayal, from confusion, and from the terrible realization that her feelings for Kang Woo hadn't disappeared just because he was actually Joonwoo. If anything, they were more complicated now, tangled up with hurt and distrust but still achingly present. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Minji avoided Joonwoo completely, taking meals in her room and only leaving her quarters when she knew he was in his study working. Mrs. Kang watched her with worried eyes but said nothing, just bringing food and tea and offering quiet comfort. On the 4th morning, Minji found a package outside her door. Inside was a first edition book on Korean contemporary art and a handwritten note. You mentioned wanting to visit the Liam Museum to see their new exhibition on minimalist ceramics but never having time. I've arranged a private tour for you this afternoon at 3 if you wish to go. No strings attached. No expectations. I simply remembered you talking about it and thought it might bring you some joy in a difficult time. The curator is a friend from my mother's art dealing days. She'll be an excellent guide. J. Minji held the note for a long time. It was such a small gesture, but it demonstrated that he had listened, really listened, during their conversations as Kang Woo. The exhibition was one she had mentioned only once, in passing weeks ago. He had remembered. Against her better judgment, she decided to accept. She needed to get out of the compound, and art had always been her refuge. The private tour of the Liam Museum was spectacular. The curator, a woman named Dr. Han who had indeed known Joonwoo's mother, was knowledgeable and engaging. Having the galleries to herself allowed Minji to spend as much time as she wanted with each piece, losing herself in the clean lines and quiet beauty of modern Korean ceramics. She was standing before a particularly striking piece, a white porcelain bowl so delicate it seemed to glow, when she sensed someone behind her. May I join you? Joonwoo's voice was tentative. Minji didn't turn around. This is a private tour you arranged. I can hardly tell you to leave. You absolutely can. I'll go if you want me to. She considered it, then relented. You can stay. He moved to stand beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. They looked at the bowl in silence for a moment. My mother would have loved this exhibition, he said quietly. She believed that true art requires both technical mastery and emotional restraint. Too much technique becomes sterile. Too much emotion becomes chaotic. The best pieces hold both in perfect tension. Is that how you see yourself? Holding technique and emotion in tension? I used to think I had to be all technique. All control and calculation and strategy. That's what the business world demanded, or so I believed. But these months with you showed me I was wrong. The technical side, the CEO side, that's important. But without the emotional side, the human side, I was becoming hollow. Minji finally turned to look at him. He was dressed casually again, not in a suit, and somehow that made him seem more real. "Why did you come today?" "'Cause I wanted to share this with you. Not as an apology or a grand gesture. Just as two people who appreciate art. If that's possible after everything." They walked through the rest of the exhibition together, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Not about the deception or the marriage, but about the art itself. Joonwoo revealed a depth of knowledge about Korean ceramics that surprised her, discussing the historical context of different techniques and the philosophical traditions that influenced modern minimalist design. "Where did you learn all this?" Minji asked as they sat in the museum's cafe afterward. "My mother was an art dealer before she married my father. She specialized in contemporary Korean art and traditional ceramics. She used to bring me to galleries and museums when I was young, teaching me to really see, not just look. After she died, visiting museums was one of the few things that made me feel close to her. I would walk through exhibitions imagining what she would say about each piece." It was a glimpse into his past, a vulnerability he hadn't shown even during their time as Kang Woo and Minji. She saw genuine grief in his eyes, a wound that hadn't healed. "I lost my mother when I was 19, she found herself saying. "Cancer. It happened fast, just 6 months from diagnosis to the end. My father never really recovered. I think that's part of why he took such risks with the business, why he stopped being careful. Some part of him stopped caring whether he succeeded or failed." "I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? We've been married 3 months, and this is the first real conversation we've had. Then let's have real conversations from now on. No more lies, no more hiding. Just honesty, even when it's difficult." Minji studied his face, searching for manipulation or calculation. But she saw only earnestness and hope and a vulnerability that matched her own. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I know. I broke that trust and I have to earn it back. But I'm asking for the chance to try. Not as Kang Woo, not as some version of myself I think you want to see, but as Lee Joonwoo. All of me, flaws and fears included. What if the real you is someone I don't like? That's a risk I have to take. But I think you already know the real me. You spent 3 months getting to know him." They sat in the cafe for another hour, talking about their mothers, their childhoods, their fears and hopes. It felt different from their conversations in the tea house. There was more weight now, more awareness of consequences. But there was also more honesty. When Joonwoo drove Minji back to the compound that evening, she felt exhausted but somehow lighter. The anger hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more manageable. She was still hurt, still wary, but no longer drowning in betrayal. "Thank you for today," she said as they pulled through the gates. "Thank you for giving me a chance. Even a small one." Over the following weeks, a delicate courtship began. Joonwoo respected her need for space while finding small ways to demonstrate that he remembered their conversations, their shared interests, their developing connection. Rare books on art history appeared in her room with notes about why he thought she'd enjoy them. The tea house was renovated with better heating and lighting for the coming winter, transformed into a space where they could comfortably spend time even in cold weather. He began asking her opinion on company matters, particularly regarding a controversial development project. The board wanted to demolish an entire neighborhood of traditional Hanok houses in central Seoul to build a new technology campus. "Your insights are valuable," he said during a dinner where they sat at opposite ends of a long table, the physical distance reflecting their emotional distance. "You understand the balance between progress and preservation. The board sees only efficiency and profit, but you see the cultural and human cost. Why does my opinion matter?" Minji asked. "I'm just the wife you married for business reasons." "No," Joonwoo said firmly. You're the woman who taught me that efficiency isn't everything. That some things are worth preserving even if they're not immediately profitable. That kindness and cultural preservation and human connection matter more than quarterly earnings. He took her advice and proposed an alternative development plan that would restore and integrate the traditional houses rather than demolish them, creating a mixed-use campus that honored the past while building for the future. The board initially resisted, but Joonwoo pushed it through, citing long-term community relations and brand image. You were right, he told Minji when the alternative plan was approved. The things that matter most can't be quantified in a spreadsheet. Slowly, meal by meal, conversation by conversation, the distance between them began to close, both literally and figuratively. They started eating breakfast together. Joonwoo would find Minji in the tea house in the afternoons, and they would talk as they had before, only now without the lies between them. But trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. Minji found herself second-guessing moments, wondering if Joonwoo was being genuine or playing another role. Was this real vulnerability or calculated manipulation? The doubt poisoned what might have been growing between them. One evening, about 2 months after Joonwoo's revelation, Minji overheard him on the phone in his study. The door was slightly ajar, and his raised voice carried into the hallway where she happened to be passing. I don't care what the board thinks, he was saying, his tone sharp with frustration. The marriage was supposed to be a business arrangement, yes, but it's become more than that. Far more. No, I won't discuss ending it just because the merger is complete. The year isn't even half over, and frankly, their opinion on my personal life is irrelevant. I'll make my own decisions about my marriage. There was a pause. Then his voice softened but remained firm. Because I care about her. Because she's extraordinary and I was a fool not to see it immediately. Because she gave away her life savings to help someone she thought was a struggling guard. And that matters more than any business advantage. Now if you'll excuse me, I have more important things to do than defend my marriage to people who wouldn't recognize genuine human connection if it appeared in a quarterly report. Minji moved away quickly before he could discover her eavesdropping, but the conversation stayed with her. He had defended their marriage to the board. He had called her extraordinary. But was it real, or was he simply committed to the role he'd chosen to play? The doubt festered through dinner that night, through the next day, until Minji couldn't take it anymore. She found him in the tea house the following afternoon, going through some documents. Are you staying married to me because you want to or because it's the right move for the company? Joonwoo looked up, startled. Where is this coming from? I heard you on the phone with the board. About our marriage. He set aside his documents and gave her his full attention. Then you heard me tell them it's none of their business and that I make my own decisions. But are those decisions based on genuine feeling or business strategy? Is this, she gestured between them, real, or are you just committed to making the best of a situation you created? Joonwoo stood and walked to where Minji stood by the window. He didn't touch her, but he held her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm going to tell you something, and you can choose whether or not to believe me. I stayed married to you initially because of business. I disguised myself as Kang Woo because I was curious about the woman I'd married sight unseen. But I fell in love with you because of who you are. Not who I needed you to be. Not who would be advantageous for me to love, but who you actually are. Love. Minji whispered. The word hung between them, weighted with implication. You've never said that before. I was afraid to. Afraid you'd think it was another manipulation, another calculated move. But it's the truth. I love you, Park Minji. I loved you when I was pretending to be Kang Woo, discovering your kindness and intelligence and humor. And I love you now as Lee Joonwoo, watching you navigate the hurt I caused while still somehow remaining open and generous. How do I know this is real? Minji felt tears threatening. How do I know you're not just saying what I want to hear? You don't. That's what trust is. It's choosing to believe even when you can't be certain. It's a leap of faith, and I know I've given you every reason not to make that leap. He finally reached out, gently taking her hands. But I can show you. Every day for the rest of our lives, I can show you through actions that this is real. That my love is real. I want to believe you, Minji admitted, her voice breaking. I've wanted to for weeks. But every time I start to let my guard down, I remember those 3 months. I remember how easily you lied. How convincingly you played a role. I understand. And I accept that I may spend years earning back your trust. But I'm willing to do that because you're worth it. Because what we have is worth it. He squeezed her hands gently. I was half alive before you, Minji. Going through motions, playing a role as CEO. Never letting anyone see the real me. You changed that. You demanded authenticity even when I was too afraid to give it. You deserve that same authenticity now. Minji looked into his eyes, searching for deception and finding only naked honesty. She thought about the past months, the slow rebuilding of connection. She thought about the man she had known as Kang Woo and the man she was coming to know as Joonwoo. They were the same person, she realized. The same intelligence, the same thoughtfulness, the same capacity for genuine connection. The lies had been terrible. The betrayal had hurt deeply. But the person underneath, the core of who he was, that had been real all along. Okay, she said quietly, making her choice. Show me. Relief flooded Joonwoo's face. He brought her hands to his lips, kissing them gently. Thank you. I won't waste this chance. The months that followed brought gradual healing and deepening connection. Joonwoo began working from home more frequently, reorganizing his schedule to prioritize their relationship. They established new rituals. Morning walks around the compound, afternoon tea where they would read together in comfortable silence, evening conversations where they shared their days. He opened up about his parents' death in ways he never had before. The accident had been caused by a drunk driver on a rainy night. Joonwoo had been supposed to be in the car too but had stayed late at the office. The guilt of surviving, of being too busy with work to be with his family, had shaped everything that came after. I threw myself into the company because I didn't know what else to do, he admitted one evening as they sat in the tea house watching snow fall. I thought if I could make the company successful enough, if I could be excellent enough at something, it would somehow matter that I lived and they died. But nothing I accomplished ever filled that void. Maybe because you were trying to fill it with the wrong things, Minji suggested gently. Achievement can't replace connection. Success can't substitute for love. I know that now. You taught me that. Minji took his hand, and they sat together in the quiet, watching winter settle over the compound. They made plans for the future. Joonwoo wanted to expand the company's charitable foundation, with Minji's help, focusing on arts education and medical care for families in need. They would endow scholarships for students who had to leave school due to family circumstances, ensuring others wouldn't face the choice Joonwoo had. Minji decided to return to school to complete her art history degree. Joonwoo supported this completely, even arranging for her to study with one of Korea's preeminent art historians as a private tutorial while she completed the formal requirements. They visited Busan several times to see Kim Young-mi, who was now fully recovered. She watched them together with evident satisfaction. You're good for each other, she told them during one visit. You've both been alone too long, armored against hurt. It's good to see you letting those walls down. Your son is stubborn, Minji said with affection. It takes work to get past his defenses. So are you, Joonwoo countered. You held on to that anger for months. I had reason to. You absolutely did. I'm just observing that we're both good at protecting ourselves. Maybe too good. They smiled at each other, and Kim Young-mi laughed. Yes, you'll be fine. Just keep arguing and forgiving and choosing each other. As the 1-year anniversary of their marriage approached, Minji realized that she had fallen completely in love with her husband. Not just the version of him she had known as Kang Woo, but the complete person with all his contradictions. She loved his intelligence and his vulnerability, his business acumen and his artistic soul, his strength and the tender places he usually kept hidden. One evening in late September, as autumn began to paint the compound in shades of red and gold, Joonwoo asked her to meet him in the tea house after sunset. When Minji arrived, she found it transformed. Hundreds of small lanterns hung from the trees, creating a soft glow that made everything seem magical. A table had been set with her favorite foods, and traditional music played softly from hidden speakers. The koi pond reflected the lights, creating dancing patterns on the water. "What's all this?" Minji asked, touched by the obvious care he'd taken. "Our second first date," Joonwoo said, pulling out a chair for her. "I never properly courted you. We started with a business arrangement, then spent months with me lying about my identity, then more months rebuilding trust. I realized I never just took you on a simple, honest date where I could show you how much you mean to me. We've been on dates. The museums, the galleries. Those were reconciliation outings. This is different. This is me, Lee Joonwoo, asking you, Park Minji, if you'll let me court you properly. No secrets, no business arrangements. Just two people exploring what they mean to each other." Minji felt tears prick her eyes. "You're ridiculous. We're already married. Which means we're doing this backward and out of order. Let me at least try to do one part right." They ate and talked, laughing about the past year's absurdities and misunderstandings. Joonwoo told her about board meetings where he'd had to stop himself from mentioning their conversations as Kang Woo, nearly revealing his deception multiple times. Minji confessed that she had known something was different about him even as Kang Woo, had sensed he was more than a security guard, but told herself she was imagining things. "I noticed how you moved," she said. "You had this natural authority that didn't match your uniform, and your hands were too smooth for manual labor. But I convinced myself I was being prejudiced, making assumptions. Your instincts were right. I'm sorry I made you doubt them." As the evening wore on, they moved from the table to sit by the pond, close enough that their shoulders touched. The lantern light reflected in the water, and the autumn air carried the scent of chrysanthemums from the garden. "In 2 weeks our contract will expire," Joonwoo said, taking her hand. "You'll have the choice to end this marriage or continue it. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it completely. There will be no pressure, no business implications, no family obligations. This choice is entirely yours." "And what do you want?" Minji asked. "I want you to stay. Not because of any business arrangement, not because of family pressure or social expectations, but because you want to. 'Cause you love me the way I love you. Because you can imagine building a life together that makes both of us happy." Minji turned to face him fully. "You know what the hardest part of the last year has been. Tell me." "Realizing that I fell in love with you twice. Once as Kang Woo, the security guard who talked about philosophy and made me laugh. And once as Lee Joonwoo, the complicated CEO who's trying to be better than he was. And then realizing that they were the same person all along. That the man who fixed locks and read Nietzsche was the same man who ran a billion-won corporation. That all of it was real, all of it was you." "It was all me," Joonwoo confirmed softly. "Every moment, every conversation. The only false thing was the name." "I don't want to end this marriage," Minji said firmly. "I want to start it properly. I want to choose you every day, not because a lawyer drafted a contract, but because I love you. Because you challenge me and support me and make me want to be braver than I am." Joonwoo's face transformed with joy and relief. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Are you sure? You can take more time. I don't want you to feel rushed." "I'm sure. I've been sure for weeks but was too scared to admit it. Scared that if I said it out loud something would go wrong. But I'm tired of being scared. He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise. It was their first real kiss, the first one not shadowed by deception or doubt. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I love you, Joonwoo said. I will love you for the rest of my life. I love you too. Both versions of you. All versions of you. They spent the rest of the evening by the pond, making detailed plans for their future. They would renew their vows in a real ceremony with friends and family, not a sterile government office. They would travel, visiting art museums and historical sites across Korea and eventually beyond. They would work together on the charitable foundation, combining his business expertise with her artistic knowledge. They would build a life that honored both tradition and innovation, efficiency and emotion, individual ambition and shared connection. 2 weeks later, on the anniversary of their original wedding, they held a ceremony in the compound's garden. Mrs. Kang wept openly, as did Kim Youngmi, who sat in the front row looking healthy and happy. Minji's father shook Joonwoo's hand with genuine warmth, thanking him not just for saving the business but for making his daughter happy. The ceremony was small but meaningful, attended only by people they truly cared about. Minji wore a traditional hanbok in soft blue, while Joonwoo wore a modern suit with traditional elements woven in. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not perfection but honest effort, not certainty but willing risk, not a fairy tale but something real. I promise to see you, Minji said, her voice clear and strong. Not just the parts that are easy or convenient but all of you. I promise to challenge you when you hide, to support you when you're vulnerable, and to love you through all the complicated, messy, beautiful parts of life. I promise to be honest, Joonwoo replied, his eyes locked on hers. Even when honesty is hard, even when I'm afraid. I promise to see you as an equal partner, to value your insights and your independence. I promise to build a life with you, not a business arrangement. I promise to choose you every day. When they sealed their vows with a kiss, their small audience applauded with genuine joy. This was no longer a business merger but a real marriage, chosen freely and celebrated openly. The reception was held in the main hall, where tables had been set with food that honored both their families' traditions. Minji's father gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry, talking about how his daughter had always been braver than she knew. Kim Youngmi spoke about how her son had finally learned to let people in, how love had made him more himself rather than less. As the evening wound down, Minji and Joonwoo found themselves alone in the tea house once more. They sat side by side, fingers interlaced, watching the last of the lanterns flicker in the autumn breeze. Do you regret it? Minji asked. The way we started. Joonwoo considered the question seriously. I regret the pain I caused you. I regret not being honest from the beginning. But I can't regret the journey that brought us here. Sometimes the wrong path leads to the right destination. That's very philosophical, Kang Woo. He laughed. Don't call me that. That name reminds me of my cowardice. I don't know. I was quite fond of Kang Woo. He was the first person who made me feel seen in a very long time. Then maybe I don't entirely regret him either. He helped me find you, even if he did it in the most complicated way possible. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the compound. In the distance, they could hear Mrs. Kang directing the cleaning staff, probably chiding them to be careful with the good dishes. Closer by, the koi pond made soft sounds as fish moved through the water. What do you think would have happened if you'd been honest from the start? Minji wondered. If you'd revealed yourself after that first day with the lock? Honestly, I think you would have been polite and distant. You would have seen me as the cold CO everyone warned you about, and I would have seen you as a business obligation. We might have made the marriage work in a practical sense, but I don't think we would have found this. He gestured to the space between them, the easy intimacy they'd built. This required time and honesty and vulnerability, even if the honesty came later than it should have. So you're saying your deception was actually good? Absolutely not. I'm saying that broken things can sometimes be mended into something stronger than they were originally. That mistakes can lead to growth if we're willing to learn from them. More philosophy. Would you prefer I speak in business metrics? We've increased our mutual satisfaction scores by 400%. Our trust index has risen steadily quarter over quarter. Minji laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. Please never talk like that again. Noted. Romantic language only from now on. They watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Minji thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. A broken lock, a disguise, 15 million won that had bought so much more than medical treatment. She thought about anger and forgiveness, betrayal and trust, fear and the courage to love anyway. I'm glad you were terrible at fixing locks, she said finally. I wasn't terrible. I was deliberately fumbling to see what you'd do. Liar. You had no idea how that lock worked. Perhaps. But I'm very good at other things. Such as. He kissed her temple softly. Loving you. Choosing you. Building a life with you. Those are good things to be good at. They stayed in the tea house until the night grew cold, reluctant to break the spell of the evening. When they finally walked back to the main house hand in hand, Minji felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year. Complete certainty. This was right. This was real. This was worth every moment of pain and doubt and fear. Their life together unfolded in the months and years that followed with the kind of quiet contentment that comes from choosing each other daily. They had arguments, of course. Joonwoo could be stubborn about business decisions, and Minji could be equally stubborn about artistic principles. But they learned to disagree with respect, to compromise without resentment, to see conflict as opportunity for deeper understanding. They traveled extensively, visiting art museums across Asia and Europe. Joonwoo delighted in watching Minji experience masterpieces in person, her face lighting up with wonder and analysis. Minji loved seeing him away from corporate pressures, relaxed and playful in ways he rarely showed others. The charitable foundation they developed together became one of Seoul's most respected philanthropic organizations, known for supporting young artists and families facing medical crises. They funded scholarships, art programs in underserved communities, and medical treatments for those who couldn't afford them. Every check they wrote honored the 15 million won Minji had once given away without hesitation. Minji completed her degree and eventually opened a gallery showcasing emerging Korean artists, with Joonwoo as her silent partner and most enthusiastic supporter. The gallery became known for discovering new talent and for exhibitions that challenged conventional boundaries between traditional and contemporary Korean art. Joonwoo gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Lee Corporation, training successors and focusing on strategic direction rather than endless meetings. He rediscovered the passion for learning he'd abandoned after his parents' death, auditing philosophy classes at Seoul National University and eventually co-teaching a seminar on ethics in business. They transformed the compound from a cold, formal space into a warm home filled with art, books, and laughter. The tea house remained their favorite spot, where they would spend afternoons reading together or simply talking as they had from the beginning. Mrs. Kang remained with them, eventually retiring but staying on as beloved family rather than staff. Kim Youngmi became a frequent visitor, delighting in the life her son had built and the woman who had made it possible. Minji's father rebuilt his business with the support of Lee Corporation's restructuring. He never forgot what his daughter had sacrificed for him, and he made sure she knew how proud he was of the woman she had become, the life she had chosen, the love she had found. On their 5th anniversary, standing in the same garden where they had renewed their vows, Joonwoo gave Minji a small painting. It showed the compound in winter, with a figure by the main gate struggling with a lock while another figure approached to help. The style was simple but evocative, capturing a moment that had changed everything. "I've been taking painting classes," he explained. "I wanted to make you something with my own hands. Something that captured the beginning of us." Minji held the painting carefully, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. We're not perfect. We're just real. We're just committed to choosing each other day after day, in all our imperfect, complicated human glory." She kissed him then, in the garden surrounded by the autumn leaves that had witnessed their second beginning, their real beginning. And she thought about how the best love stories weren't the ones without obstacles or pain. They were the ones where people chose to stay, to trust, to believe even when belief was difficult. Their story had started with a test, with deception and doubt. But it had transformed into something beautiful through honesty and courage and the daily choice to love despite and because of everything they had been through. Years later, when people asked how they fell in love, they would smile at each other with shared understanding. The truth was too complicated, too messy, too human for easy explanation. So they would simply say they met when he needed help with a lock, and she happened to have the key. Which was true enough. The rest was theirs alone to know, to cherish, to live day by day in the life they had built together. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real.